Well, our first panel for this afternoon is Improving Access to Opportunity Through Regional Transportation Planning. The Long Range Transportation Plan and OneSTL addresses the region's changing demographics in order to improve access to jobs, to housing, and opportunity for all people through a combination of all modes of transportation. And this panel will look at the relationship between long-range planning and local projects. All of our panelists are affiliated with East-West Gateway Council of Governments. The East-West Gateway Council of Governments provides a forum for local governments of the bi-state region, and they work together across jurisdictional boundaries. The geographic region that East-West Gateway has served since 1965 covers more than 4,500 square miles and serves as the metropolitan planning organization for the area. Mr. David Wilson is Senior Manager for Environment and Community Planning, with Mr. Paul Hubbman, who serves as the Corridor and Long Range Planning Senior Manager. Both men worked on the HUD Sustainable Communities Grant, which led to OneSTL. Mr. Cordaryl Patrick serves as the City Administrator for Dellwood. He has also served as Public Services Director with the city and has been an active member of the East-West Gateway Council of Governments for many years. So, welcome to all of our panelists, and Mr. Wilson, I think you'll start us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Just to get you started here, a couple of words about East-West Gateway Council of Governments. Interestingly, this morning there was discussion about the origins of fair housing at HUD back in the 1960s. East-West Gateway was formed about that same time, 1965, as a regional coordinating council with representation from both Missouri and Illinois. Our board of directors is made up of 24 members, 12 from Illinois, 12 from Missouri, so when there's state conflicts, they've got to find agreement in order to move forward. And thank you for giving so much background on East-West Gateway. The other thing that I wanted to mention about that is that as a regional planning organization, the board is made up of the elected leaders of each of the counties and the city of St. Louis in this core of the St. Louis area. We also have about 8 mayors and about 8 citizen representatives that serve on our board. And I might be taking Paul's thunder, but one of our main responsibilities is those local leaders have to approve the planning for federal dollars that are spent for transportation. So the focus then of this section on the relationship between transportation, community development, housing, et cetera, is kind of our theme. So in kicking us off here today, I wanted to talk with you particularly about OneSTL, which is a regional plan for sustainable development that East-West Gateway took the lead in organizing. Starting in 2010, we convened a number of meetings to develop a plan, to put a proposal to put to HUD to get financial support to develop a regional plan for sustainable development. The end result, 4 years later, we got the funding. We had 11 core partners, the sharing in the financial resources from HUD for the planning, but we involved more than 50 organizations in the actual planning that led to OneSTL. And OneSTL theme, many communities, one future. This St. Louis metropolitan area we're talking about, there are 200 local governments. That's a lot of small communities, and some of them larger, to coordinate. But if we think of ourselves as one region, we think and we believe, and I think our planning shows, that we can be much more successful for the long term in fostering healthy, prosperous, growing, dynamic communities that serve all people. The OneSTL plan then is really just a framework for collaboration, and you notice our theme, collaborative approaches here. Collaboration among many partners working with a common vision for a dynamic and healthy region. The plan, our hope is that this plan will have no one owner. So you notice we call it OneSTL. We don't say this is East-West Gateway's plan. Paul's going to tell you a little bit about how East-West Gateway is implementing what we see as really our main component of the plan with transportation planning. But many organizations can collaborate effectively when there is a framework for understanding and a framework for understanding where the common ground is, where we can get started, where we can move forward. We have a printed document on our table. East West Gateway has a table right outside here. There should be at least one copy of the printed document there. We have some, if you wish to sign up on the list for more information from East West Gateway, we can follow up with you. But we have, everything is online at onestl.org. And I mentioned this morning during the Q&A session, there's a green pen in your bag that has the web address. You can find that plan, and there are about 75 reports that were produced over the last 4 years that are there as well, including the plan we heard about this morning, the Fair Housing Equity Assessment that was done by the Equal Housing Opportunity Council. That is there in a PDF format. And a lot of the transit plans that you heard about as well. OneSTL ended up with 11 different communities throughout the region, each engaged in 3 separate community engagement sessions. And Aaron Young, who's in the audience, and I were at most of those sessions, along with a number of other staff. We heard consistently from communities there was interest in collaboration, and people like where they live. So when you look at this list of themes on the board, if you can see it, distinctive communities make up a healthy region. That's one of our themes. Of course, everybody's interested in prosperity. We also heard from everybody the importance of inclusiveness, of green, that is healthy water, healthy air, good, vibrant community parks that people can visit and recreate in. A prepared community is one that's ready to meet disaster and head it off if they can. A prepared community also is a safe community where people can walk on streets safely. A connected community has an effective and integrated transportation system that serves people walking as well as on bicycles and in cars, and freight services as well. Efficiency cuts across all kinds of local government services. If we can save money and by being more efficient, that's going to benefit taxpayers. And of course, educated. Education crosses all parts of the region. We really need some regional collaboration around that, don't we? Our plan has goals, objectives, and strategies. 50 organizations have identified some strategy that they're undertaking. There's plenty of room for more organizations to look at this vision, identify their strategy, and get involved. The website gives you access to do that. If you are not yet a member of OneSTL Network, you can register online. It doesn't cost you anything. You'll get our newsletter. You'll be aware of conferences like this one and other events coming up in the future that we hope will serve to strengthen communication and collaboration across the region. And then, last point before I turn it over to Paul, this morning Chris Kramer talked about Natural Bridge Road, the 10 communities, and the Great Streets project along Natural Bridge. He also mentioned Great Streets planning in Dellwood on West Florissant, and he mentioned the transit-oriented development projects that Beyond Housing was involved with on St. Charles Rock Road at the metro station there. And that is where East-West Gateway and transportation planning is seeking to work with communities and community organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, investors, et cetera, to plan and develop strategies to improve the quality of life for residents. And that kind of summarizes a lot of the work that we did over the last 10 years, or 4 years, sorry. And those plans that we're going to be referencing are also all at that OneSTL website. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul to talk a little bit more about our long-range transportation plan and how these specific projects tie into that. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. What I'd like to do is, what David said, is just kind of start with sort of our bigger picture. And while I don't do our long-range regional transportation plan, I am kind of in that group and responsible to make sure it gets done. that is really East-West Gateway's core legal reason for existing. That's what we have to do. And we're sort of a funnel for all of the transportation projects that want to be accomplished in the region by the various municipalities and everybody. And we're the funnel point to where that gets brought down to what we can actually afford to build. And the criteria that are used to get there are essentially the long-range plan that we develop. So are these projects that people want to build consistent with the long-range plan that our board has approved and we very methodically and rigorously have developed over time? So every 4 years we update the plan, and then project implementation and funding with federal money gets passed through that layer of filter before it gets built. And the reason that that kind of touches into OneSTL, there have been a sort of converging priorities the past, I don't know, 10 years probably. MoDOT and IDOT, both of their recent long-range plans are pushing for more multimodalism and more consistent coordinated planning. They're looking at the impacts of land use on when they're considering their transportation plans. MAP 21, which is the federal transportation legislation, is also pushing hard for this, more of a coordinated effort, so that you're not just looking at land use in this silo, the transportation system that supports it in this silo. Community development is on its own over here. The administration has been pushing and advancing projects across the country that really begin to knit these together in a coordinated effort. And OneSTL is very much about that. So when it comes back to the transportation piece at the end, which is where our real teeth are, East-West Gateway, we do many other things, but it's funding. We have the carrot of funding. Traditionally, in this country, we don't do much about land use and those sorts of plans. That's more restrictions or legislation and ordinance is fairly timid and fairly easy to manipulate. Transportation is hard and fast. We will pay for this. And so it's a stronger carrot than we have in the other components. So East-West Gateway is a natural partner in that, but our role is somewhat limited. We do a lot of other things, and OneSTL does provide a foundation for those activities as well. So when I talk about sort of these converging priorities, I know this is difficult to read. I'm just going to touch on this, but on the left side is a list of the connected goals. Connected is one of the sections of OneSTL, and it's about the transportation piece. And that was developed, we were one of the core members in the OneSTL planning process. That was developed with our regional transportation plan, our RTP, in mind. The 10 guiding principles for East-West Gateway that's the list on the right. And I know, like I said, you can't read them, but they are very synchronous. Economic development, integrated land use and transportation planning, improving access to transit for people who want an alternative or need an alternative means to get to work or school or wherever they're going. Promoting alternative transportation options, non-motorized, bike, ped. Those things are actually on the uptick. People are driving less. The trend has been for people to drive less in the past 6, 7, 8, 10 years in our country. Maximize efficiency of the existing transportation system, and that's about improving the function of the existing infrastructure that we've got instead of building new interstates and expanding. We have empty neighborhoods. We don't need to constantly expand our transportation network. And then safety is always in there as well. I'm just going to touch on this. Performance measures tie into this. MAP 21 and our own goals that we're in our updating process for our regional transportation plan. We're starting to look at performance measures. Okay, some of them include things like percentage of workers using modes other than automobiles, percentage of jobs within a quarter of a mile of a Metrolink station, percentage of residents that live within a walkable distance to a bus stop. These are the types of things that we're beginning to measure. It's about neighborhoods and supporting neighborhoods and that job force, that workforce, access to work, to play, and the things you need to do just to kind of exist for households and neighborhoods. Okay, so how does this all translate to more the finer grain, the smaller scale, the neighborhood planning stuff, the projects that get built? So we maintain a long-range transportation plan for the entire region. It's hard to get people really engaged in that because it's pretty undefined. You're looking, 30 years into the future, and you're looking across 200 government, an area that encompasses 200 governments. But at some point, that does boil down to real projects. And we have what's called a TIP process, where those projects get evaluated against our long-range plan and then funded or not funded. So the criteria for weighing those projects ties back in to all of this, those performance measures, those integrated planning efforts. What are the impacts on land use? Are we supporting existing neighborhoods? Are we maximizing the efficiency of the existing transportation network and promoting additional options so people don't have to get in their car and drive? So that helps. That's kind of the traditional way that we've been doing project funding for the past 30, 40 years. Now, the Great Streets Initiative is a different example. It's a different approach. It was born out of a bit of a frustration on our end. No matter how much we tweaked and tuned those evaluation criteria, we were still building projects that at the end of the day, sometimes you'd sit there and look, wow, we paid that for what? And so before OneSTL, before these things started to gel at the national level, Great Streets Initiative was formed at our local level in 2006. And its goals are very synchronous with these national goals and the federal requirements and the intent behind OneSTL. And it includes things such as Great Streets. So this is a program that we developed. The intent is to integrate that planning. The process is very important. I'll touch on that in a minute. But to define the program, I think you'll get a quick sense. I'll just run through this quickly. Great streets are great places. They integrate land use and transportation planning, accommodating all users and modes. If you want the choice to live in your neighborhood when you're a kid, stay in that neighborhood when you come back from school, get a job, then when you're, empty nester and then into your late years, not all neighborhoods can really support that. Economically vibrant, of course, the economy needs to work or the neighborhood begins to bleed away. A lot of other issues are tied to that. Environmentally responsible, this is, we could say green, that tends to mean different things for different people. We're trying to boil it down into this quick nutshell. What we know now, about our infrastructure and how it works. Current thinking, that's just taking national best practices and rolling it in. They are measurable, so this is again, coming up again. So these performance measures are used to identify priorities. When you're talking to the community, what's important to them? Okay, if safety is important, what does that mean? Is that reducing the number of accidents at this intersection? Does that mean it needs to be safer to cross the street? What does that mean for that project in that community? They define what that performance measure is. Are you trying to reduce accidents? Are you trying, what is the goal? So that begins to inform the options that are developed when you're trying to address, put a plan together, how you evaluate those options to pick the one that fits the best, and then how to track the success or failure over time so that you can kind of learn from what was done and adjust over time if you need to. And that's the same for these performance measures at all scales, whether it's regional or project-based. And then developing collaboratively. This is really, we have a fundamental belief that you have to integrate the local knowledge with technical expertise. Great Streets is not a construction program. It's a planning assistance program. And we tried to put together a team of various people that fits the project. Usually there's a market study and a market plan put together for an area. Do they have all of the types of housing that they need and the proper mix that seems like it's going to work over the next 20 years? Are there, commercial space? Is there office space? Is there, what do they need? More pedestrian scale commercial space, more automotive? It could be anything. It's tailor fit to what that is. You have traffic planners. You have landscape architects. You have an urban planner, usually a couple. You have just a whole host of different things that are plugged in. You have various engineers, civil and traffic. So you fit the team. That's your technical expertise, but they know examples and they're book smart, but they don't know the community. So you have to set up a system where you're integrating with the community and you're hearing from them, whether, and that's interviews, that's public meetings, that's all of the above, and it's iterative. You're going to them first, what is your community? Are we hearing you right? And you come back after generating some options. What do you think of this? And you just, as you meet with them more and more and more, you refine the project to a final plan. And I just wanted to touch on this. This map is our region, and it just sort of shows where we've done these projects. And they fit a wide range of contexts, from rural hamlet to kind of a downtown Main Street to suburban arterial corridor. It applies, this program fits a wide range of contexts in the area. And just showing briefly some of the things that come out of these plans typically, you wind up with various plans and drawings that show how the transportation system can work better, what modifications are required or recommended, what your land use recommendations would be, what might go where and how much space it takes up, and then what the traffic patterns could be around that. All of this stuff starts with the community's vision of what they want for the plan, and then all the other stuff, the transportation network, the land use, all of that stuff sort of plugs in to support what the community's vision of their plan is. Even the economic plan, the market study, it just kind of helps inform what the reasonable expectation is for the first 5-10 years, and then how that might jumpstart other things as you move down the road. And then, of course, placemaking is a key piece to this. Places need to be desirable, to be maintained and valued by a community over time. Obviously, it has to work. It has to function well. Are you going to pick up eggs, or are you going to the bar? Or are you going to do both? Are you going to hit the grocery store, dry cleaner, pick up your kids, go to school, do your work down the block? These places have to support a wide range of activities for a wide range of different people. And I'm just going to pass this on to Cordaryl now. We got to work together on a stretch of West Florissant, our most recent project. Was started up basically a year ago, a couple of weeks from now. So that plan was wrapped up at the end of June, and I think you'll recognize some of the context. So.
Thank you, Paul. I want to try to do a few things here. I want to put into context some of the things that both David and Paul mentioned about the Great Streaks and how that play a role into the project we did in the city of Dellwood in conjunction with the city of Ferguson, East-West Gateway, as well as St. Louis County. Also, I want to talk about the existing conditions, what we know is happening on West Florissant currently today, and what we would like for it to look like. Also, I'm going to show some sample plans of the project itself and what the end product was. So, again, St. Louis County, East-West Gateway, the cities of Ferguson and Dellwood came together and said, let's look at West Florissant. What is it doing? How does it look right now? What can we do to make West Florissant more vibrant for our communities? And the planning process, as Paul mentions, commenced in November of 2013 and concluded of June of this year. West Florissant has long been a street that serves motorized vehicles well. We know that. But the issue is, what about those that walk, bike, or take some other type of transportation to shop, to go to their neighbor's home, to convene somewhere, or just to have a conversation in their neighborhoods? How do they get back and forth on West Florissant? So the existing conditions as they were is that there were pavements, sidewalks that didn't look like others. Some sidewalks were made for individuals to park their cars on. Some of the driveways to existing businesses were not defined. Some of the businesses that you go in, you have a hard time getting out of those businesses. So we looked at, does the West Florissant corridor beginning south at Buzzfall all the way north to 270, does this corridor meets the 8 principles that Paul just outlined as a great street. And the conclusion was it doesn't. So how do we make it better? What do we do to make this corridor work for the people that live and travel and shop down this corridor? There were 5 goals in mind that we wanted to do. The first goal was to mobility, access, and safety. What we found out is that at West Florissant and Chambers, which is the heart of Dellwood, which we're trying to define, and I'll get to that in a minute, as the town center for the city of Dellwood, there were individuals who were getting hit by cars. And the reason for this is because there was no defined place for them to cross the streets, but they were trying to get to one side of the street to the next because of the bus stops or whatnot. And so there was no real safety as to how those individuals would be able to safely travel up and down the corridor without risking the chance of getting hit. Economic development. Is the corridor working for the people that live and travel down the corridor? Are the shops there? Are the things that people want in the neighborhood, are those shops and businesses exist on this corridor? What I failed to mention is that this plan did not happen just from the government and the individuals that you see on this panel. There were committees put together from communities of both the city of Dellwood and the cities of Ferguson, East West Gateway, in St. Louis County to come together and say, what do you want to see in your neighborhood? What are the things that happen in your neighborhood that's not working for you? What are the businesses that you would like to see in both the city of Dellwood and the city of Ferguson that you do not see? And how can we attract those businesses to our area? And one of the things that we found out is that businesses tend to locate in places where there's traffic and where they know that people are going to shop in their businesses. And so we wanted to make sure that the corridor was economic. There was an economic development piece, community places where people can gather. There were no place where people just come and sit and have a cup of coffee, for example. So neighbors were not able to meet neighbors in the neighborhood. Businesses across the corridor didn't have places or don't have places to take individuals for business meetings and those sorts of things. So that piece is missing. One of the largest pieces that's missing from the whole corridor is image and identity. There's no identity, there's no image on the corridor. You shouldn't be able to tell when you leave the city of Ferguson and enter the city of Dellwood, and leave the city of Dellwood and enter the city of Ferguson, and then into St. Louis County unincorporated. So there has to be some type of zoning piece that we include in this whole process to make the corridor looks the same across the whole spectrum. And we have committed to doing that. What gives this corridor this whole warm, fuzzy feeling? It makes people want to come to the area. Make people feel safe when they come to the area. So that's one of the other pieces that we were looking at. Sustainable practices. What's going to work? As Paul said, one of the 8 steps of the Great Streets Project is to make sure that things are measurable. We didn't want to do things that we know would not work. It wasn't a process that we wanted to go through just because. It is a process that we wanted to go through and make sure that the end product of it is something that we're able to do and able to fulfill. This next slide shows some of the imagery that we thought maybe that the corridor has the potential to look like. As you see, number 1 is closer to north of 270 in West Florissant. Then you have the Green Boulevard, and number 3 is the Dellwood Town Center, which I mentioned earlier. Is this whole thing of identifying and having some type of image about your city, or about the corridor itself. And so we knew as the city of Dellwood that we had to create some type of image or some type of identity so that when people entered the city of Dellwood, they knew they were in the city of Dellwood. The last slide just talks about some of the things that the plan include, the end product of the plan itself. As Paul mentioned, transportation was one of the larger pieces to this plan as to how do we make the corridor economic vibrant and also a place that we can dwell on our community development as well. The zoning recommendations, again, we have to make sure that all parties involved come together with some type of consensus of what the corridor should look like and to make the zonings fit those things so that we're able to do those things. Community development recommendations, also economic development strategies. There are several things that came out of the plan as to possibility of things that can happen on this corridor for Dellwood itself. We talked about maybe senior homes, libraries, early childhood centers, those type of things that will build upon the community development piece, as well as the things that needs to happen to enhance the economic development piece as well, such as streetscapes and those type of things. At this time, I guess we'll open the door for questions. Thank you.
All right, we do have time for just a couple of questions. If anyone has one, just please step on up to that microphone and keep your questions concise if you could. And give us your first name.
My name's Pat. I work near the new Van Deventer and Forest Park intersection and development in the city of St. Louis, and I'm pretty disappointed in the urban planning and particularly architectural design that's happening there in that development. What role does architectural design and urban planning play in this plan? You know, you talked about identity, Mayor, and I think that that's a really important thing, is to create walkable streets that look like they're walkable, because if you walk past a big box store with a huge parking lot in front, you're going to keep on walking or not walk there again. But if you walk by a storefront where you can go in and cross the sidewalk, then you're going to walk up and down that street a lot.
I guess I'll start with that. First of all, these community and master planning efforts don't really get into the architecture, other than when you get into things like form-based code. It is prescriptive. It describes where you want the building, how you want it sited in relationship to the street, the sidewalk, those public spaces, how that building interacts with those public spaces, how much of it is window, how much, you know, is there some detailing to it? What's the scale, and how well does it integrate with the street? In terms of the architecture itself, I think you can go anywhere and find a plethora of examples of buildings that people don't like, right? And there's no accounting for taste. I think that when you're focused on placemaking and you're trying to develop a sense of place like that, style is important, but it doesn't have to be any one specific style. It just needs to have some character, some attractiveness, and a human scale. And in terms of the specific aesthetics, yeah, that's not really the realm of what we're doing.
But as you say, Paul, the form-based codes piece can give cities more opportunity to define what these buildings look like. And that was one of the recommendations that came out of OneSTL. At the onestl.org website, we have a toolkit of sustainable solutions that includes, for example, the description of form-based codes as one practice that communities can use. And again, when citizens work with their local government to define what they want ahead of time, then it's a lot easier for the government leaders to step up and say to a new developer, this is what our community wants. Give this to us and we'll work closely with you. Wouldn't you say, Cordaryl?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say to your question, because, again, we allowed the community to participate in this process. What buildings look like wasn't part of this process, but the form-based code as to what we want the corridor to potentially look like was. So this gives us an opportunity to allow the community to say, these are the type of things we want and like to see, versus just throwing something up and we back at where we were.
All right, thanks for your question, Pat. I see we have two people waiting. We'll make these our final two questions just in the interest of time, but I'm sure that our esteemed panelists will be happy to talk out in the hallway if there's something you're dying to ask and didn't get a chance. So can you give us your first name and keep your question concise? Thanks.
Sure. My name's Andrew, and two finance-related questions. So I look at the Stan Musial Bridge, and that was $695 million. And just wondering, in terms of allocation of money, is there some sort of kind of quota, say, Great Streets program versus highway?
Like bridge.
Yeah, and
Bridge,
obviously
Great
bridge,
Streets.
obviously bridge, but one of the biggest public works programs in the nation. So just in terms of allocation, how dollars, is it 10% goes to local communities and 90% goes to other? And then other quick question is just in terms of, it seems to me when I'm in the county that there's a lot of state-funded roads, Page, Olive. But when I'm in the city, there's a lack of state-funded roads, and so that the city of St. Louis, besides the federal highways, is financing most of our road system. Whereas I go into the county, once I cross the line, it seems like not most, but major roads like Page and Olive and so forth are funded by the state. If you could just comment on that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll take the lead on that one too. So to get to your first point, the allocation sort of disparity, I guess you're talking to. No, we don't carve aside a certain percentage of money for this and that and the other. That has happened in the past. What we find is we wind up having to build bad projects because they fit that category, but not necessarily compete well against the broad range of all the projects that we're looking at when we're looking at the options in front of us. But what we do is these particular projects, even though they're not construction projects, we have a plan at the end of the day, they're queued up. They're geared to compete very well for the funding that is available because of so many of the consistent priorities with, say, the Great Streets program and the evaluation criteria that we'll be rolling into our regular funding cycles for typical projects. So that's pretty much what we can do with that. And the other question was, refresh my memory here.
State-funded roads?
State-funded roads. So you're correct. MoDOT, long time ago, when it needed money, there was a bargain that was struck where they took over a lot of county roads across the state. And so that's why there are a plethora of MoDOT roads that they maintain across the state. They have many more lane miles than a lot of other states do because of that deal that was done long ago. Within the city of St. Louis, there are roads that meet MoDOT funding criteria that are operated and owned by the city, but they are eligible for MoDOT funds, and MoDOT funds are used to maintain and improve those roads. That's going to vary. It's from year to year. I don't know that, but I know there's no hard fixed percentage.
All right, and final question?
My name is Felisa Williams, and my question is, how do you get the community to tell you what they want? How do you get them to understand that they do want and deserve something more? I see the pictures up there, and we work down at Indian S Management Hyde Park, and we can't get our tenants to care about the neighborhood. So how do you get them to first care about what you're bringing to the neighborhood so that they can keep it going, so that they can want that change and know that they deserve that change?
Well, what we did is, the first thing is we know our community. We know what it takes to get our community out to these type of events. We know how long they are willing to stay at these type of events, and we know, how would they participate in these type of events. So much of that went into the process of actually picking a planner for this process, and that was one of the most important questions to all the individuals that bidded for this project is what type of plan do you have out there that's going to make sure that the community come out and participate in this process? Because without the community participation, this plan would have just been something that the government or the staff or whatnot wanted, and not what the community wants. So there was a party that played a part with making sure that flyers and those type of things went out to homes in both cities to make sure that individuals came out to the events. I will say, it's my opinion, that it was very successful. There were many people that came out to these events. So you just have to know your community and know what it takes to get them out to these type of events. One of the things that we used specifically was we made sure that there was some type of fun and exciting piece to it. What I mean,
cookies,
right? Cookies, jump houses, those type of things. So you have to just know your community and what it takes to get them out and just get them interested in what's going on. What you will find is that, contrary to what people may think, people that invest in their communities and have been in their community, are homeowners in their community, want to see a change and see the betterment of their community. And so those individuals will come out. And what happens is one person will tell the next, and then that person tells another. So it becomes this chain of people telling each other, and before you know it, I mean, you have 100 people at an event like this.
Just like with voting, we have low turnout and a small percentage can make the decisions for the community at large. Community engagement is the same thing. It's those people who care enough to come out in an afternoon or an evening and spend an hour or two talking and sharing their ideas. Now, what we can do to try to increase that is we reach out to organizations, and as well as the local government officials, obviously, because they care about voters and the citizens in their community. But it is a process. I mean, all of the organizations that are in this room can do your part when there are events or planning events or other kinds of developmental plans going on. Just sharing that information with your membership can be very important.
I'd just like to add real briefly. It's very hard to hear and engage people when you're talking about, you know, the region of St. Louis and a 30-year plan across the transportation infrastructure. I'd rather stay home on Monday night with my kid. And so boiling it down to how it's relevant to them is always the trick. But with these great streets projects, we do tend to get good turnout because they're competitive. We don't just randomly select these projects. Communities have to apply. You know, Dellwood teamed up with Ferguson and St. Louis County and went through a screening process for this. And, you know, they were the one that got picked. So there's already an interest there at sort of the local representational level, which tends to boil down pretty well to the community participation as well.
All right, and we're going to have to stop there. I thank you for the good questions, the takeaway, cookies and bounce houses. That's good to know. All right, I'd like to thank our panel, David Wilson, Paul Hubbman, and Cordaryl Patrick. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.